This story isn't about me, but about my father. His encounter with this demon or spirit happened during his youth. When my dad had lived in Korea, he had a friend that had a house high up in the mountains. The area is known to be beautiful, a place that is covered with huge trees that block out the sunlight. But during the night, this place gets pitch black, making it impossible to see anything unless you have a flashlight. Well, one day my dad and his friend decided to go up on the mountain during the day, because they wanted to go swim in this water hole which was at the beginning of the long river that flowed down from the mountain. My dad and his friend played there throughout the day until night and decided to go back because it was getting dark. So they packed their things and started to make their way for home. On the way back, my dad and his friend decided to have a race to see who can make it back to the house first. They burst off and went their different paths, and then my dad got lost. He wandered around for a few hours and it became pitch black. He couldn't see anything in sight. After a few more minutes of wandering around, he heard someone calling out his name. It sounded like his friend's sister. He thought that she had come out looking for him, so he ran towards the sound of the voice. To his surprise, it was his friend's sister, but her back was turned to my father. When my dad reached for her shoulder, she bolted off running. Naturally, my dad ran after her. She was running extremely fast and very abnormally. It seemed like her knees were bending outwards as she was running, and her arms were flailing up and down. After a long chase, she suddenly came to a stop and my dad bumped into her because of his momentum. But she didn't move, a single bit. My dad called out her name and she turned around. It was the face of his friend's sister, but the face was horribly twisted. Her eyes were round, pitch black, and she had her mouth wide open. She had sharp teeth and her skin was extremely pale. My dad couldn't believe what he saw, and he was stuck there frozen solid. Then this thing that looked like his friend's sister began approaching my dad, limping left to right, with a smile on her face. He let out a scream, and this thing began mocking him, laughing and screaming back. This thing was approaching him, and he couldn't move. It seemed like he was out of luck until he heard a familiar voice calling out his name. It was his friend's sister. She came out from the woods with a flashlight and pointed it at my dad. He was so much in shock that he couldn't even speak. His friend's sister began yelling at my dad, but my dad didn't even respond to her. He looked back to where this thing was, but it was gone. She then knew something horrible had happened to him. They went back to the house and my dad told them about what happened and what he had seen. There really isn't an explanation as to why a thing like this exists in that area, but there have been reports of many people who have gone missing, so who knows what this thing actually is. Okay, so first a little backstory. I was and am a Catholic and have never been too serious about it. I have always believed that everyone has a guardian angel. I have been lucky enough to see mine a few times. When I was younger, I would always see an all-white husky, sitting either in the corner of my room or outside my window. This dog was not ordinary though. This is because standing on all fours, the dog stood about 6 feet high. Its fur was flawless, no dirt, mud, or grime, not even around the paws. Its eyes were light powder blue, and every time I saw the dog, I felt safe and comforted. This occurred from when I was 3 until about when I turned 6. I used to have this friend, who we'll call John. I began hanging out with John when I was 13. One day, while our parents were talking in my living room, we went out to their van to just sit and listen to music and hang out. It was a crisp night in summer, with a slight breeze. Stars twinkled in the sky as we were there trading ghost stories. Then John said something that would change my life. "Do you see it?" John said that as he raised his hand and pointed to the top of a local industrial building about 2 stories high. "No, what are you talking about?" I asked, squinting and focusing, trying to see what John had spoke of. "Right there, it's peeking over the edge of that building at us." Now I started to freak out a little bit. Looking at us? Why was it looking at us? And who or what was this apparently visible thing? I heard a noise coming from my front door. His parents were opening the screen door while talking on their way out. I looked back to the building. Holy shit. I couldn't believe my eyes. I saw it. It was black, but I couldn't make out what it looked like. Just a head peering over the ledge just enough to see its eyes. Those red, piercing eyes. I will never forget that look, as if it was penetrating my soul. It watched us like a tiger on the prowl. A sense of evil immediately overwhelmed me, almost as if a curtain was draped over me. I didn't see this creature, I call it the Dark One, for some time, but ever since that day I've had freak encounters. For example, I would be riding my bike through the neighborhood and would see bald, anorexic looking little cretins. I would see multiple of them, hiding under cars and in sewer drains, but never in the light, not even street lights. One night I was riding my bike and rounded the last corner to my house, and I stopped dead in my tracks. There was a dog, but this dog was different than my guardian angel. It was about the same size but black as coal. I saw it bare its teeth at me and take an attack stance. Its back arched and its tail stood straight up. His eyes were yellow, like a soft dried up mustard color. I turned tail and pedaled as fast as I could. I didn't see that dog again. The last time I saw anything of this nature was also the most bone-chillingly terrified I've ever been. I was walking down a street that was right behind and parallel to the main road in town. Small businesses and fast food restaurants lined both sides of the main road with alleys in between. It was about 10:30 at night. I was walking to a friend's house when I saw it. The dark one was back and was standing in the alley across from the main street. I still couldn't make out any details, only that it stood about 10 feet tall and still had that piercing red-eyed stare. I picked up my pace passing a shop. I looked into the next alley across the street and there it was again. But this time it looked different, more detailed. I could see his brooding chest and horns, like the cliché evil goat horns. My pace quickened once more, and I looked in the next alley, and there it was again, smiling, not grinning, smiling, like it was there for me, and it wasn't going to leave without me. The details grew on him now. I could see everything. It had feet like a human, as well as a face that resembled a human as well, except that its facial features were larger. Its jaw protruded out along with its nose. Its eyes were larger than usual, and its mouth was twice the size of ours. I froze and felt an overwhelming panic come over me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I prayed, just standing there staring at the cracks in the sidewalk. When I finished, I looked up and I saw a woman. She stood about 7 feet tall wearing a white dress, almost like a nightgown. Her hair was light silver, almost white, and there were a few things off about her, such as she wasn't wearing any shoes. Also, there was not anything on her. No dirt, mud, or grime, not even on her feet. Also, she kept smiling. Not a creepy or ominous smile, just a friendly smile. But the oddest thing I noticed was that I felt something that I hadn't felt since I was 6. Then I realized she was the dog. She was my guardian angel. I immediately looked to the alley to see if the dark one was there. He wasn't, and the terrible feeling I had completely vanished. I looked back to say something to her, thank you, and whatever else I could think of, but she was gone. Vanished into the thin air. I have never seen the dark one again, and I am thankful every day for it. Okay, I'll start off telling you that the first set of repeated occurrences in my story happened over a period of around 3 weeks, in February or March of 2015. Usually, my friend and I would play Xbox online for hours at night after school, because, well, that's what friends do. This night was no different. Everyone in my house was asleep except for me. We were playing Grand Theft Auto 5 and doing the typical massacring of the city folk. He was talking to me about something through my headset, which I don't remember, when I heard the loudest, most blood-curdling scream right outside my window. The only way to describe it is to imagine someone being burned alive, or being slowly tortured. To put this into perspective, I lived in the basement, and I had the usual small windows toward the ceiling. The scream lasted for a good 4 to 5 seconds, which doesn't sound like long, but the immense fear makes it seem much, much longer. I interrupted my friend to tell him I had just heard something absolutely terrifying, to which his reply is, "Oh, that's weird. I know what you're thinking. Maybe it's a joke and he knows about it. Well, I don't have many friends, and the ones I do wouldn't do that. I mean, I could feel the scream inside of me, if that makes any sense." Anyway, I got mad because he didn't believe me, but then eventually calmed down and just forgot about it. About 2 days passed and nothing really was going on that day since it was a Saturday. It was light out, and I went to take the trash out that was in the garage. That's when I heard it again. That same Bloody Mary scream I had heard a couple days ago outside, and it sounded like it was down the road. It almost immobilized me with fear. Then, after a minute, I shook it off and decided to find out what it was. I walked through the house and went to the front door. My younger sister was sitting on the couch and listening to music. I asked her if she heard the scream. She said that she did, but she didn't care. What was going on? Why did no one else feel any attraction to these instances? I opened the front door and looked down the road. No person on fire. No one lying half dead in the road. Nothing. Was I going crazy? I went back to the house feeling total confusion. Now fast forward maybe a week. I was playing my Xbox alone now during the day. I started to remember the screams and told myself that I'd be prepared for anything if it happened again. Then something interrupted my train of thought. I hear the scream right outside my window again. The fear this sound produces is unmatched, even though I was waiting for it. I paused the game and ran upstairs. I flung the door open only to find my next door neighbor look right into my eyes with sheer panic as she frantically backed out of her driveway. She sped off like a bat out of hell. Oh my god, what's going on? I thought to myself. Oddly, the friendship that was 7 years old had stopped involuntarily. I don't know if the screams caused it, but I had another friend who had moved back into town and I told him about it. He was shocked and confused as well as to who or what caused these sounds. We drove around the town all the time for hours every day, and one night he was very silent. I asked him what was up. I heard the scream, the one you spoke about. I heard it in my house, in the basement when I was home alone. Somehow I felt good about what had happened to him. Someone had experienced what I had, and I didn't feel crazy anymore. I asked him what it was like, and he said it was like someone dying in his house. But inside he knew that there wasn't anyone. He said for him the scream was a woman's voice. I didn't know what that meant, so I decided to look it up on the internet. I couldn't find anything other than the old folk tales of the Banshee's scream. We just decided to shrug it off and go on with our daily lives. Then, 2 days later, he texted me in the middle of the night, saying that he had heard it again. He had been sleeping in his car, far away from his house for fear he might hear it again. He was at the park and said he had heard an even more terrifying scream coming from the woods. Unbelievably, he still slept there. I would have driven to the next town if I was him to avoid that sound. We looked it up again only to find out nothing. The screams stopped. We don't know what had happened during those occurrences. Was this all a big joke? Were we going crazy? I don't know, but to this day, I still don't know.